everyone. Welcome to the Squared Circle Psychobabble. My name is Michael Valenti. This is Ralph Valenti. For news, reviews, and conversations on all things pro wrestling, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about Dave Meltzer's star ratings that he gave out last week for AEW Revolution, in particularly the Kenny Omega Hangman Page versus the Young Bucks match, where he gave it 6 stars. So it's not the first time he's broken his 5-star rating scale, but you know, a lot of people are talking about this match and it was good. It was awesome. There were flaws in it, whatever your case may be. So I thought we could talk about not the match in particular, because we already did our AEW review, but what makes a good match? And can you put numbers into it and say that's a 5-star match? That's a 10-star match. And if that's the case, what gives you that perfect match?
Right.
More than perfect match, as Dave Meltzer has done in the past too. So Ralph, I'll start with you. What do you look for in what makes a good, great, or awesome or perfect match?
Yeah. So I think before we kind of get into this conversation, so just a little backstory with this. So obviously, anytime we personally review a match, there's always going to be people that either disagree with us or Dave Meltzer or amongst each other, right? Because largely, anytime you're debating how good a match is, it's extremely subjective. So I may enjoy certain aspects of a match, and there may be certain things that I'm looking for as a fan, and there's other things that other people are going to fancy and you know want to see in certain matches that would mean their star rating or the standard they hold it to is going to be much different than my opinion.
Right.
So. Some of the things that I look for when I'm looking for grading a match to try and determine how good a match really is, pretty basic stuff, and this is stuff that you're seeing just about in every professional wrestling match. The difference is some guys are really good at doing it, and some guys aren't necessarily as good at doing it. So one of the big things for me is psychology and storytelling, and that's something that I know a lot of the wrestling purists or fans from decades past say they lack in today's professional wrestling. Now, I certainly think that they're telling stories, especially some of the guys that are good at the craft, maybe not to the certain extent where you have these technical battles like a Bret Hart or Ric Flair, true technicians of the sport.
Right.
And that's been the big criticism. Now, when I say psychology, what I mean by that is, do the motivations match what's actually happening in the match? So if you're a heel, are you doing certain things that fit your character? One of the big things that you see a lot now in professional wrestling is the heel characters getting cheered. When you look at MJF, he's going out there, he's flipping off little kids, he's doing whatever he has to do to generate that heat. Now, that helps establish himself as a heel. Are the motivations that are the things he's doing matching the motivations leading into the match? I know one of the biggest criticisms of right now, as far as a steel cage match, the option of escaping the match. So when you think about what a steel cage match really is, 2 guys trapped in a cage because it's gotten to the point where they just want to get their hands on each other. Usually the face wants to beat the crap out of the heel. If you now have it where somebody can escape that setting to win a match, it kind of defeats the purpose of it. And that's what some people will tell you. So like the psychology of the match, does it actually make sense? Like getting to that point where something's happening in a match, is there reason and motivation to support the action that you're seeing in the ring?
Well, that's one good thing about AEW with the steel cage matches, that they got rid of the escape rule.
I agree.
That's a great thing. I never really understood the whole escape clause where someone can leave to win the match, but that's also a heelish tactic. But it always seems like the baby face wins that way more than the heel.
Yeah.
Which kind of is backwards when you think about the psychology of it. But going back to the Kenny and Bucks situation with psychology, and I think some people will make the assumption that a spot fest can't have ring psychology. And this is an example. I think that is not the case. This was, some would say, a spot fest, but the spots meant something. All the moves meant something in the end, whether it was, we're going to do what it takes to win the tag team championships. We have to alienate Hangman Page. We have to, where Kenny Omega is doing things that he might not want to because his friends are on the other side of the ring. Matt Jackson's doing things, to sell his back.
Yeah.
There was always something there to tell the story and the psychology. And to that regard, I think this match definitely did that.
Yep.
I think there definitely was storytelling, and I will agree with you. There does have to be some form of psychology, some form of storytelling in the match. And it's not necessarily that you have to be a fan of drama. It's just wrestling, I think. The better, and this is with anything that you like, whether it's music or television shows or movies. If there's no story behind it, if there's no reason why we're doing these things, it falls flat.
Yep, I agree 100%. And that's one of the things that I think people overlook. So I think somebody had actually made a comment in our comment section, as far as professional wrestling matches, just I can go and enjoy a match just to see a match. I don't need a story. I don't need the drama and all of that. So I agree. I mean, I can definitely go and watch a match and just, enjoy it for the spectacle and the athleticism. But I think you really miss out on how impactful a match can be if there is no backstory to it. Really, the backstory helps people get invested in it. So when you talk about, literature or movies, there's good movies and there's bad movies. Good movies and good books and good literature help establish the backstory and help build it to the climax. And that's very much like a good professional wrestling match or segment, right? So when you look at some of the things throughout that match specifically, there was a lot going on. And you compare that to like what happens in movies and literature. So you got man versus man. That's really literally just like athleticism, me versus you. How well are we doing against each other?
Right.
There's somebody's out there to win this contest. Man versus self. An internal battle, an internal struggle. You've seen them try to do that with Randy Orton in the whole Edge situation where he's kind of telling this story and he's having this internal battle. Should he be doing these things to his friend? Why is he doing it? You're actually getting insight into the mindset of Randy Orton, stuff like that.
Or even Bray Wyatt, the story there of, hey, I didn't forget what happened six years ago against Cena, and that's why I'm coming after you this year at WrestleMania.
Yeah.
Like he's forgotten the Universal Championship and forgot what Goldberg does because Cena means more to him than what Goldberg can. And guess what? Maybe down the line, he'll face Goldberg and get that win back. Yep. But that's the stuff, the story behind the match, before the match, gets you so much more invested. And once you are invested, I think the crowd plays a much bigger role in the match too, because if it's just where they're just doing spots and the crowd just goes, oh, like they're just popping just because the move was awesome. If that's your cup of tea, that's fine. But I think the crowd would be even more invested when you tease that and go, oh, no, not yet. Oh, so close, or reversals and stuff. And they feel that emotion with you in the match.
Yeah.
And good wrestlers are able to do that, not just by the moves, but the stuff in between the moves. And that's sometimes those that don't have as much experience in the ring. That's the stuff that they're missing. And people are like, well, why aren't they getting pushed like they are? It's that stuff.
Yep.
The stuff in between. That's the issue.
Getting the crowd invested in yourself, your character, your journey to whatever you're trying to accomplish. That's your job as the heel, to make people hate you so much where they can't wait to see the face kick the crap out of you. Or if you're the face, you want them to be sympathetic to the fact that your journey and your struggle is now their struggle and their journey.
Right.
So, an easy way to kind of look at that whenever somebody brings up, okay, well, if you're a true professional wrestling fan, you can enjoy it just for the spectacle and the match itself and appreciate it. Not saying I can't, but the backstory helps you get invested. If you take a Yankee fan and tell them, hey, go watch a Dodgers and a Angels game, go watch them play each other. You could probably enjoy the game. If it's a good game, back and forth, some home runs, you'll probably enjoy it for the sheer athleticism involved in it. But it's not like you're going to be as invested in it if it was like the Yankees in the World Series or the Red Sox in the World Series and you've been a fan since you were a kid. That's why you have these superstars become so big. Mm-hmm. Hulkamania wasn't just Hulk Hogan, versus Warrior. It was a movement. It was a way of life. The ultimate challenge. The match with Andre the Giant, and as far as human emotion, I mean, maybe one of the best examples you can see of that is Hogan and Rock. I mean, if you look at the crowd, the investment, when Hogan started hulking up towards the end of the match, I mean, the crowd investment doesn't get much better than that, and had it not been for the storytelling before the match, leading into the match, and throughout the match, it wasn't like they were doing any crazy flips or anything like that. It was just basic psychology, doing certain things to get the crowd to react, which that's why certain things, like when people criticize the AEW tag division, like Jim Cornette does, if you're not using certain things as far as the psychology in a match to build a hot tag, to get people to pop. We said it when we were watching the Dark Order match. We were like, wow, they used the hot tag, and guess what? It worked.
Right.
Getting fans to react to certain things.
I'm glad you brought up Jim Cornette because I told you on the review of AEW Revolution, I was curious to see what he would say about these matches, especially the Kenny Omega Page and the Young Bucks match and the Orange Cassidy Pac match. One of them, I hit the nail on the head. He totally trashed it, and that was the Pac and Orange Cassidy match.
We can get into that after.
The other match was the tag match, and he basically praised it to the point where, like, he didn't want to admit it was a good match because it would totally, like, discredit him and his character, but he even said that this was a good match.
It was a good match.
It was a good match, and the storytelling, and like I said, the stuff in between, the toe-to-toe face-off with Page and Matt Jackson where Page spits in his face. Mm-hmm. The moment where Page wants to powerbomb Matt Jackson through the table and Kenny Omega says, no, get in the ring. We have to win this match. You know, little things like that. After the 3 Northern Light suplexes onto the ramp, you see Matt Jackson turn his head like he understands that he has to win, but at the same time, he's still showing some signs of remorse because of the fact that, you know, he has to put his best friend through this or one of his best friends through this. The stuff after the match too. And another great point of what makes a match great, in my opinion, is commentary. And this was a great job by Excalibur, JR, and Shivani telling that story in between. I think also, you know, WWE, for the most part today, that's a lost art. Their commentary is not good, and I think a lot of people could agree to that.
Aside from NXT and more Ronaldo.
Right. So the fact that, you know, what's the story being told? Why is this move being applied? What is the overall outcome? And that match in particular, they did that. You know, for those in WWE, you want to look back to a great example of commentary, look at that match at WrestleMania 25 between Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. That to me is the perfect match. It had storytelling, it had psychology, crowd investment, commentary. It had the spots, you know, there was technical stuff. There was high spots, reversals, and all the, you know, that's the match that may have started that new form of wrestling where we need to have all these false finishes and no one really has a finisher anymore because of that match. But it really is the perfect match. And I think everybody's going out there trying to replicate that match.
Yeah. And another thing too that match did, and a lot of successful matches do, is it allows you to suspend your disbelief. To look, everybody knows professional wrestling is a work now, but you have to be able to suspend disbelief.
Right.
You have to be able to lose yourself in the moment. And that's why fans like professional wrestling so much, because no matter what's going on, if it's a good, well-worked match and it has all the elements and it works, you lose yourself in that moment, and you don't care that it's predetermined. You don't care that you know that the outcome is already decided behind the curtain before they are even coming out.
Yes.
And obviously Undertaker and Shawn Michaels were able to do that. That was a magical moment. Jim Ross obviously did his job, but that's why certain people, probably Jim Cornette being the one that comes to mind, that is most notable, criticize people like Orange Cassidy and Marco Stunt, because you can't necessarily suspend disbelief with those guys. Now, Orange Cassidy, we talked about it on our show. His match with Pac, I thought, worked very well. He didn't do anything overly egregious for me to be like, okay, well, you're exposing the business and all this type of stuff, which is the obvious criticism that you get. He's a polarizing guy. You put a guy like Marco Stunt in there, coming in there 5'0", weighing 120, and he's in there with supposedly some of the best athletes in professional wrestling. It's hard to believe.
Right.
Now you look at the other end of the spectrum when you have a world heavyweight champion like a Brock Lesnar, and that's why when we talk about him on our show, is he the best professional wrestler in the world today? Probably not by any standard, and most people would say that. But his presence, what he brings to the table, the fact that he's an established guy who has a legitimate UFC, MMA background, a dominant force, he passes the eye test. That's what you get. That inserting a guy like John Cena, inserting guys that have that credibility, it makes for a better atmosphere, which even brings a substandard match in itself with just moveset to like the next level.
Right.
You saw that in the Royal Rumble. A lot of people were pissed off with Brock being in the Royal Rumble, but it helps build credibility. The fact that he eliminated all those guys and then got eliminated by Drew McIntyre helped build that moment for Drew McIntyre. He helped make that moment.
Right.
And that's what people don't understand. That's what people need to start to look at. Like, it's a part of the story leading up to something.
Right. And
you've got the payoff.
The same thing about, Ricochet getting squashed in like 90 seconds. It's like, did you want to see him get some offense in? Yeah, but at the end of it, this is for a WrestleMania moment. You're sacrificing Ricochet here, who is, let's face it, he's 100 pounds lighter than Brock Lesnar, if not even more. The fact that he could contest with Brock Lesnar, people would question that, I think. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you have Drew McIntyre going in to WrestleMania, eliminating Brock Lesnar, it just makes him look even stronger when that moment happens that Drew McIntyre beats Brock Lesnar. Like, Brock can just throw anybody around in seconds. But yet here's Drew McIntyre that beats him.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and then, we look at Raw this past week or week before where he did the 3 Claymores? That was last week.
Yep.
Those 3 Claymores, look how the pops that he got for each of the Claymores in the Barclays Center. So...
And not only that, but I mean, when you talk about Lesnar, I know a lot of people are very critical of him. We've been critical of him on the show before and just his matches, but it's not like he hasn't put in certain guys over before.
Right.
And his ability to sell, people should recognize him for that because, I mean, he does sell very well.
Yes,
and he
does.
definitely goes out there and tries to put on the best performance that he possibly can. But, so yeah, I mean, all of those elements kind of tied into one another. Those are what I look for: psychology, storytelling, and storytelling can happen both in the match, like we're talking about, where you're establishing a heel and a face, and some type of internal turmoil or man versus man, or even before that. I think Dustin and Cody had a good story going into the match and got people invested in it.
Yep.
So when I say storytelling, it's not just confined to what's happening in the squared circle. It's leading up to it. Like, what's the story going into this? Daniel Bryan, another good example, leading into WrestleMania, culminated with him winning the title. So stuff like that, that's what I look for. I like human investment. I like being invested in the match and having some type of emotion attached to it.
And I do want to preface this too and put a lot of emphasis in the fact that it doesn't necessarily have to be a technical masterpiece. It doesn't have to be, submissions and or a street fight with a bunch of weapons, or a cage match, or some weird gimmick, or a spot fest. Like, all those types of matches, you can have this recipe in those matches. The better, we talk about the TLC matches with the Hardys, Edge and Christian, and the Dudley Boys. Mm-hmm. Or, when it comes to steel cage matches, that moment where Snuka dove off the top of the cage. Or just technical great matches like Owen versus Bret Hart at WrestleMania 10.
Bret versus Roddy Piper.
Piper.
That's what we grew up watching.
Right.
So that's like what we're accustomed to. That's what we look for.
But at the same time, you look at a match like at WrestleMania 17, Austin versus The Rock, which ended up being a no disqualification match. Just because there's weapons in it doesn't mean it's not a great match.
Well, look at Ciampa and Gargano. A lot of that feud revolved around the knee brace and all of that, and they had their unsanctioned match. And I think that may have been, I don't know, maybe it was the match prior to the unsanctioned match where I believe Johnny tapped out Tommaso Ciampa with the knee brace. He put the
right.
Stuff like that. Like, that's good use of the psychology and the storytelling going into the match.
But I think there's also those purists that grew up like we did. Like, our first exposure to wrestling, WrestleMania 6, 7, and 8. So you have the Ultimate Challenge, you have Savage and Flair, Piper and Hart. There's some big matches in those WrestleManias. Then as we grow up through the Attitude Era, all the stuff with Austin and The Rock, people that grew up at that time, they're like, they see today and they go, well, this is a spot fest. This stuff doesn't look realistic. In most cases, that is true, but I think there's some cases, and I think this is a prime example. This tag team match that Meltzer gave 6 stars is a prime example that not all spot fests are bad matches. No. Or that because there's these high-risk matches that it shouldn't, you lose the disbelief or the suspension of disbelief. I think this match showed that you can suspend disbelief in these kind of spot fest matches. Most cases, I will agree. Like, when we see like the Lucha Brothers and the Young Bucks ladder match, it seemed like they were just doing spots for the sake of spots.
Yeah.
This case, I don't think that was the point. Like, there were their spots, but it wasn't just doing a spot for the sake of the spot. And that was told in the ring. Like, they got to their spots, but you knew why they were going to those spots.
And that's part of the thing too, especially with today's professional wrestling. You have some of those lapsed fans who are going to tune in and they're going to watch it, or even some of the fans that watch it on a regular basis. So if it looks overly choreographed, like the spots where everyone's just standing around and somebody dives on top of everybody fumbles over like they're dominoes or shit like that. Like, that's the stuff that, to me, that's going to expose the business more than anything else. And people are always like, oh, well, everybody knows it's a work. It's like, yes, but you don't really want to like wink at them and be like, hey, we know it's fake.
Right.
Watch this, and those are the things like that the purists, like your Jim Cornettes and the older fan base that will comment on it, like things like that. But
so now that we have explained what we think goes into a great match, a perfect match or whatever, do you agree with Meltzer that this was at least a perfect match or more, going with 6 stars?
Well, I think that obviously, like we said before, it's always subjective. I don't know if there's a such thing as a perfect match. Obviously, I pointed out a few flaws that I thought kind of shown through in the match. So I don't necessarily know if it was a perfect match. I know that it was a very good work tag match that got the people invested in it and was probably the best match of the night. And you'll probably find people that say that it wasn't a very good match. So I mean, it's all up to what your standard is. And Dave Meltzer thought it was perfect. So who am I to say he's wrong, and who is he to say that I'm wrong?
Right, exactly. And I think that's part of today's wrestling conversations. We preface our shows for news, reviews, and conversations on all things pro wrestling. Yeah. Emphasis on conversations. Like, you may disagree with what I have to say, and I might disagree with what you have to say, but we're having a conversation on it. And I think today's wrestling fans, I'm not saying all of them, but there's definitely a small percentage of them that's, if you disagree with them, they will go over you and try to prove to you why you're wrong instead of just having a conversation. Yeah. Like, they throw, or they'll like insult you because you said that I said that the tag match was a good match, not an awesome match. Or, I say that there were some things wrong with it. How can you say that? And they get all defensive. Like, no, it's like, was this a good match? Yes. I think everybody can at least agree it was a good match. Was it a great match? I think most people would say it's a great match. Was it a perfect match? I think a very select few, like Dave Meltzer, will say it is a perfect match. Me, I think it falls in the great. I probably would put it, if I was doing it out of 5, I would say it'd probably be a 4.5, 4 3/4 stars. But that's just me. You might say it's a 3.5 star match. I'm not going to insult you because you think that.
Right.
And we even debated it when we were watching it. I was like, that was a great match. You said, well, it was a good match.
Yeah.
And he's like, you questioned me and we talked about it, but at the end of the day, you have your opinion, I have my opinion.
Yeah, and again, I mean, we talk about this all the time. I think right now we're at a point in professional wrestling where a lot of this debate is definitely generational, because you've had your eras where like your older demographic who were watching matches like Hogan and the Hogans of the world, Warriors, Andres, Ric Flair's, and then you've got your Attitude Era, and now you have this new era, which I don't even know if it's defined as anything, maybe the Elite Era, whatever you want to call it. It's just different styles, and different styles is some people are going to prefer this versus that. I'm not going to sit here and say that match was any better than Hogan Andre, because Hogan Andre will go down as one of the best matches ever. But if you ask like a 20-year-old, go watch Hogan Andre, they may say that match is boring.
Right.
So it's all subjective to the person, what their standard is, what they like, what they're interested in. And you're never going to please everybody, and there's always going to be this debate until the next era comes around, and then people will be debating that.
Right. All right, so let us know that we gave us our subjective opinion on what goes into a great match. What are your subjective opinions on what goes into a great match in the comments below? And if you want to give a star rating on the match, go ahead. Share this all over social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at SCPB Podcast. And for news, reviews, and conversations on all things pro wrestling, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. For Ralph Valenti, my name is Michael Valenti. Thank you for watching the Squared Circle Psychobabble.